A rising actress, Melissa Carter, is publicly humiliated and forced out of her breakthrough role after a crew member's biased actions distort the truth. Jason Hart, emboldened by his status, leaves her reputation in ruins, sparking outrage among all who witness the injustice. Yet as a hidden video surfaces, Melissa's courage and the unwavering stand of unlikely allies flip the entire story. Get ready for a gripping journey where redemption triumphs and justice finally shines. Melissa Carter's alarm went off before dawn, echoing through her tiny apartment. She rose from bed with shoulders aching, partly from nerves, partly from the residue of so many years spent fighting uphill battles in the acting world. She made coffee, reviewed her script, and stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror, whispering lines with conviction, memorizing not just her words but the motivations behind them. Today could be the turning point. Her first major series role, a shot at legitimizing everything she'd sacrificed. As Melissa walked to the studio, her thoughts were a blend of hope and old caution. She had learned, sometimes painfully, that in Hollywood, optimism could be fragile. The entrance to the lot shimmered in the early morning sun, but next to the wide gates, two security guards exchanged quick glances as she arrived. She recognized their expressions instantly: assessment, judgment, a silent question about whether she belonged. Melissa smiled, offered her access badge, and felt the familiar resolve settle in her chest. Inside, the set buzzed with activity. Technicians navigated cables, assistants gave directions, makeup artists hurried between stations. Melissa greeted the sound engineer, a kind older man named Ray, who smiled and asked about her family. She responded warmly, grateful for small kindnesses that made each day more bearable. In the makeup chair, she talked through her character's backstory, a complex, promising woman shaped by adversity, hoping the team would see the depth she intended to give the role. As shooting preparations dragged on, tension began to rise. Some crew members were clearly stressed by delays and the looming pressure of the studio's deadlines. Others were simply tired, eyes glazed from previous nights spent in overtime. The director, Lisa, was decisive but distracted, answering questions from 5 directions at once. Melissa rehearsed her lines quietly, pacing near the craft table. Across the room, she noticed Jason Hart, the chief camera operator, holding court near his equipment rig. He was imposing older, jaded, with a reputation for brilliance and little patience for error. Jason's success had bred a sort of entitlement. He saw himself as the enforcer of industry traditions and rarely hesitated to express skepticism about new approaches or faces. Melissa found herself bracing for an encounter. It came sooner than she expected. The assistant director apologized for lighting issues, and the entire cast waited for a reset. Jason approached suddenly, reviewing the script, suggesting a change that would reduce Melissa's scene to an outdated stereotype one that ignored all the agency and nuance she'd worked into her portrayal. Melissa stood her ground, responding calmly but firmly. She explained her character's actions, referencing background detail, her vision for the role, and a desire to uphold positive representation. Jason's demeanor shifted. His words grew sharper, laced with condescension. "We're not here to rewrite the formula," he said, then added a pointed remark that implied her casting was more about quotas than quality. People nearby stopped what they were doing. The air grew heavy, each second weighed down by unspoken alliances, old wounds, and recent progress. Melissa felt the chill of isolation, her courage echoing back at her in empty silence. The tension persisted, everyone aware that a line was being crossed but no one willing to confront it. Jason's irritation escalated. His tone, now audible to everyone, questioned her professionalism, dismissed her input, and ignored her experience. The director hesitated, unsure whether to assert herself or diffuse the situation quietly. Then, abruptly, something shifted. Jason's actions turned from passive-aggressive to outright hostile, his gestures too forceful, his words biting, aimed to undermine Melissa's authority before the entire crew. Melissa felt her confidence tested. She refused to lower her eyes, but inside she was shaking. She sensed some cast members watching with worry, others avoiding her gaze altogether, torn between workplace politics and personal conscience. The confrontation ended as quickly as it had begun, but the fallout lingered. The director, caught in the storm, called for an unscheduled break and urged everyone outside. Crew members scattered, some in groups, others alone, some whispering behind hands. The energy on set had changed, all hope and excitement replaced by uncertainty and quiet dread. Melissa was left standing beside an untouched prop table, her hands trembling and her breath shallow. Her thoughts spiraled. Frustration with injustice, pain from public embarrassment, anger for being targeted so openly. She tried to remind herself of past triumphs, of every moment she had overcome adversity, but now the weight felt different, heavier, somehow more personal. In those minutes, Melissa knew her career hung by a thread. She also understood that what happened next would be remembered not just by her, but by anyone who cared to notice the truth underneath the facade. With trembling resolve, she stayed where she was until the crew reconvened, determined not to give in, not to disappear. The fight for dignity was far from over, and Melissa was determined to face it head-on, even if the world around her turned away. In the quiet after the confrontation on set, Melissa barely had time to gather her thoughts before the world around her seemed to change. Word of the incident spread quickly, not just among crew members but beyond, carried irresistibly by second-hand accounts, brief texts, and gossip. She sat in her apartment that evening, replaying every moment in her head, the cold silence, the hurtful words, her own refusal to submit. For the first time, her confidence faltered, and she wondered whether the new opportunity had slipped through her fingers. Within hours, clipped recordings from the set appeared on social media. Melissa's face, frozen in one frame, circulated under misleading headlines. Some versions of the video had been edited, so only the final moments were visible. Her refusing Jason's directive, standing firm, while voices were raised off-screen. Context vanished, replaced by harmful speculation and narrative, spun from impatience and bias. Strangers began to weigh in. Some commented with sympathy, but many repeated unfounded accusations. Melissa's inbox filled with messages from friends and colleagues, some expressing disbelief, others distancing themselves without explanation. Production companies and casting agents responded swiftly, searching for ways to avoid the negative publicity. Melissa received a call from her agent. Her role was now pending review, all media appearances postponed. She stared at her calendar, watching job offers vanish, contracts evaporate, emails from publicists dwindle into silence. The series she once expected to launch her career now threatened to define her in ways she hadn't chosen. She worried for her reputation. She worried about renting her apartment, paying her bills, supporting her family. In one sleepless night, hope faded, replaced by a sense of loss and isolation. As online debate intensified, the press seized on the viral story. Articles appeared, lines blurred between fact and rumor. Melissa's character was dissected not by critics who had seen her performance, but by writers seeking clicks and controversy. Some news segments quoted anonymous sources who claimed Melissa had a history of uncooperative behavior. Others suggested she had trouble fitting in. Journalists reached out for comment, but real understanding felt out of reach. Meanwhile, Jason publicly addressed the incident. He issued a carefully worded statement about misunderstandings and unfortunate escalation, and painted himself as overwhelmed, not malicious. Some professionals in the industry, even those who had privately supported Melissa, hesitated to defend her openly. Fear of alienating powerful figures or losing prestige kept their support quiet. Melissa found herself trapped in a whirlwind cycle, where every explanation she gave was met with skepticism. She understood the danger of responding with anger. Public perception could be unforgiving and swift to judge. She spoke softly when contacted, clarifying events, leaning on her experience and her professionalism. But the audience was fragmented. Some viewers believed her. Others repeated misinformation, convinced by the speed and certainty of social media. Months earlier, stories about the challenges faced by black actresses in Hollywood had filled her with hope. They seemed like proof that progress was possible, that new opportunities were opening. Now these stories felt distant and theoretical. She tried to recall advice given by trusted mentors. Stay true to your purpose. Your work matters. You are not alone. But in the cold glow of the phone screen, surrounded by negativity, those words felt remote. Melissa spent days in uncertainty. The pain of public humiliation and career setbacks was overwhelming. She wondered how much one moment could erase years of work. The world that had once felt welcoming now seemed lined with barriers, most invisible, until she tried to cross them. She kept reaching for the spark that had driven her, her belief in honest storytelling, her commitment to portraying complexity and dignity on screen. Even at her lowest, Melissa resisted the urge to disappear completely. She found solace in small moments. A call from an old friend, a message from a fan who still believed in her grace, an evening spent editing her audition tape for an independent film. Yet underlying every gesture was a heavy question. How much of her career and her hope had been destroyed by a wave of misinformation and a system unwilling to defend its promises? The city outside her window pulsed with the usual rhythm of ambition and disappointment, but for Melissa, everything had changed. She closed her laptop, set her phone aside, and determined to face the world again, no matter how many voices tried to shape her story without knowing the truth. Melissa spent countless days enveloped in silence, her confidence wavering as she watched the narrative of her life being rewritten without her voice. It seemed as if the world would never remember the truth. Co-workers kept their distance, the industry moved on, and her reputation remained in tatters. Each morning brought the same dull ache of disappointment. Every evening ended with questions about her future and her faith in fairness. Yet, quietly and stubbornly, she refused to lose herself to despair. One afternoon, a message arrived from an unexpected source, a junior lighting assistant named Brooke, whose quiet presence Melissa vaguely remembered from chaotic shooting days. Brooke explained that she had backed up the full video footage for record-keeping, and while searching old files, discovered the raw clip of the moment everyone had argued over. Brooke hesitated before sharing it, knowing the risks, but realized that truth could not remain hidden forever. Within hours, the complete video surfaced online. Finally, context returned. Melissa's professionalism, her calm refusal to accept a regressive role, and the way she was confronted unfairly. The emotional weight of the footage struck viewers and colleagues alike. Social media conversations shifted swiftly, moving from judgment and skepticism to shock and outrage. Influential voices in the entertainment community began to speak up, sharing messages of support and demanding honest discussion about workplace conduct and the barriers faced by black actresses. News outlets picked up the corrected story. Editorials appeared urging the industry to address biases and inequity more directly. A leading producer who had earlier hesitated reached out to Melissa apologetically, offering new opportunities and expressing regret for distancing himself during the controversy. The studio released a statement acknowledging mistakes, promising better policies and more transparent conflict resolution. As understanding and support built around Melissa, her feelings subtly changed. Hope began to replace the weight of isolation. She started connecting with other actors, sharing her experiences with those eager to listen. Knowing her story now had the power to foster change. Small victories, positive messages from fans, an invitation to audition for an independent film. A local director's encouragement reinforced her resolve. The momentum reminded her that setbacks, while painful, could be overcome with resilience and the right allies. In candid interviews, Melissa reflected on what had happened, the lessons learned, and the importance of standing up for dignity even when the outcome seemed uncertain. Her story became part of a larger conversation about fairness in Hollywood, inspiring others whose journeys had also been shaped by misunderstanding and adversity. Throughout it all, Melissa found a new source of strength, not only in vindication, but also in the community that rallied around her story. She understood that hope was not just an abstract hope for career success, but a real spark that could drive meaningful change. This experience reminded everyone watching that truth, when finally revealed, could be healing, and that even the most solitary battles might lead toward a future where fairness and compassion took center stage. Melissa's decision to turn down her old role marked the true beginning of her renaissance. Grateful for vindication, But determined not to let her future be dictated by fear or mere restoration, she chose the path of reinvention. The independent film where she landed the lead was unlike anything she had done before, a deeply personal production, directed by Camille Bryant, a visionary filmmaker committed to telling stories rooted in resilience and honest emotion. Camille's team fostered a workplace of mutual support and openness. Melissa's thoughts and feelings weren't just invited, they became essential to the creative process. Before each scene, the cast gathered for roundtable discussions, ensuring that every line carried truth and intent. Melissa no longer felt alone. She saw, in each colleague's eyes, a recognition of both her talent and the battles she had endured. The film itself was intimate, no extravagant sets or massive budgets, but an atmosphere charged with sincerity and catharsis. Filming brought moments of challenge and triumph. Some nights Melissa wrestled with old wounds, uncertain whether she could embody the character's journey without reliving her own. On others, she felt a wondrous alignment between her personal growth and her performance. Camille pushed her to explore the character's vulnerabilities, encouraging real tears, laughter, and silences. The project demanded honesty, and for Melissa, that honesty was healing. During this time, Melissa nurtured new community roots. She joined panel discussions on equity and justice, speaking at universities and community centers about her ordeal, her recovery, and the wider challenges that plagued Hollywood. Her insights became a catalyst for industry change, one that reached producers, union leaders, and up-and-coming artists alike. She advocated for comprehensive anti-discrimination policies, transparent dispute processes, and mental health resources for all creative professionals. During each public appearance, she wore her experience with grace, her voice steady and clear. Melissa's activism extended further. She initiated mentorship programs for young performers, focusing especially on those who felt marginalized or voiceless in the industry. Through monthly workshops and one-on-one meetings, she taught the importance of self-advocacy, constructive solidarity, and creative perseverance. Her story, now widely known, inspired many to champion fairness in their own workplaces. Some mentees published essays about her impact. Others sent messages of gratitude, describing how her journey helped them reclaim their confidence. The independent film premiered at several festivals, greeted with standing ovations. Critics called her performance a revelation, lauding the subtlety and depth she brought to every frame. Trade magazines highlighted not only Melissa's artistry, but also her leadership in effecting change behind the scenes. The festival circuit became a whirlwind of hope interviews, panel QAs, and spirited debates about justice and representation. Melissa found herself invited to judge script contests, guest teach university classes, and collaborate with film programs in other cities. Her professional network flourished. Creators who had once kept their distance now sought her perspective for projects requiring emotional authenticity. Melissa declined some offers, choosing only those that aligned with her values. She returned briefly to mainstream productions, but set firm boundaries about on-set behavior and creative inclusion. Her presence sent a message. The industry was changing, and she would be part of building its new foundation. Outside film, Melissa became a fixture in her local arts community. She helped found a non-profit that provided mental health services tailored to performing artists, combining peer support with access to counselors trained in creative trauma. She hosted open forums where artists could share their stories and advice. Over time, the gatherings grew into a national network, connecting survivors of workplace injustice and sparking cultural dialogue about resilience. At home, Melissa found peace in daily routines and friendships strengthened by shared trials. She maintained relationships with those who had stood by her friends, family, and colleagues whose steady presence anchored her through uncertainty. She took solace in journaling, long walks, and creative hobbies outside of acting, discovering new dimensions of herself beyond industry labels. Years passed, and Melissa's journey became the subject of articles, podcasts, and documentaries. Aspiring actors studied her interviews. Scholars cited her story in research about reputation, recovery, and renewal. Critics recognized her not only for her talents but for her commitment to dignified work and solidarity. Melissa herself considered her victory ongoing, not a single moment, but an enduring practice. She remained alert to signs of injustice, eager to address issues as they arose. Yet she allowed herself time for joy, celebration, and gratitude. She understood that catharsis is not the end of pain, but the embrace of possibility. Her story, once shaped by adversity, now belonged to everyone striving for recognition, fairness, and hope. Melissa Carter became a symbol of a new era, proof that from crisis, confidence and compassion could be reborn. Her journey, marked by courage and community, inspired change not just in Hollywood, but in every heart called to dream and rebuild.